This video is actually an excerpt from my free Quilting for Beginners course, so if you want to learn how to quilt but you don't know where to start, check out the links in this video's description. Glue basting has become my absolute favorite way to baste a quilt for so many reasons. It's faster, I get the best results, I don't have to remove anything while I'm quilting because there's nothing to remove. There's no pins or thread or anything. There's almost zero shifting when I'm quilting, so I can use less batting and backing. If I don't wash out the glue, it keeps my quilts just a little bit stiffer, which I really like for mini quilts and for wall hangings. And there's probably a lot more reasons why I prefer it. I just can't think of it off the top of my head. But it is my favorite, and I've been doing it for quite a while now. So the first difference is that we're going to start by taking the quilt top away. And I'm going to work with just the backing and the batting at first. So I'll flip this over. And I'm going to fold up half of the batting, or the backing, sorry, like so. And I'll get out my handy dandy Elmer's glue, and I'm just going to do some nice thin lines of glue. I don't need to go over the top with this. A little really goes a long way. So some people might do absolutely huge thick lines, not necessary. And in fact, I don't like having to sew through big globs of glue. So thinner is definitely fine. So I'll start by going down the side with a light line of glue, just because I want to make sure I get my edges as well as possible. And I think this is below the camera. Here we go. I'm going to do the bottom edge too. And I'm really having to squeeze because I probably need to wash out the cap because it can get clogged up if I'm not careful, because the batting fibers can sometimes get in there. In fact, I'm going to go and wash it out real quick. Okay, there we go. All I needed was a little hot water and some patience. So what I do is, to make sure the clog is all gone, I'll fill the cap up with water, and if it drips freely out of the nozzle, then the clog is gone. Okay, so let's try this again. We'll start from this side. I'm going to do a nice even bead of glue, not too much. I'll do it on the sides and the bottom. And then what I like to do is divide up that space. So I'll maybe do a line sort of in the center, and I'll do a line up here. And then you can fill it in however you want, maybe some squiggles or something. I do sort of a backwards in shape, like this. You could probably do less than this. If you think about pin basting, there's only a fist width apart, and this is even less space in between each line. Okay, so I'll fill that all in. And I'm not very even about it sometimes, but so far it really hasn't made a difference. Not one that I've noticed. Okay, so let's get closer so you can see what that looks like. So here it is. Not a super thick line. In fact, some of the lines just sort of beat up because they're not thick enough to form a full line. So that's sort of what you're looking for. Now when it's time to put the backing back down, I'm going to be very careful that I don't drag anything through the glue, and I'm going to sort of pull it a little bit taut and then gently lay it down. And the glue obviously is not going to dry right away, so you have a little bit of time to fix any mistakes that you might have made. But at this point, it's all about smoothing it out and making sure that the glue comes into good contact with the backing fabric. And we're going to do the same thing where we work from the middle out. So smooth outwards and not inwards, okay? I picked out this cat fabric because it was super cheap. And for my mini quilts, I never see the backs, so I just try to get something that doesn't break the bank. Okay, so I'm not done yet. I have to do the other side. So I'm going to just spin it around. If I was at a different table and I didn't have a wall right here, I could just go to the other side and do it that way, but I do not. So I'm just going to pull it back again, and I'm going to stop when I feel the tug of the glue. So I can see a little bit of the glue too. So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to do the same pattern that I did before. Sides, down the sides, across the bottom, other side, across the top, and then break it up into manageable pieces. So again, here it is all glued up. I'm going to take the backing, very carefully lay it down, smooth it out, and then I can do the top, the quilt top. When I'm working on a bigger quilt top, I'll actually usually let this air dry first before I start moving it and folding it or whatever I do to get it ready to put the quilt top on. Because I like it to be nice and sturdy and dried and make sure that nothing's going to come out of place. But because this is just a little guy, a little mini quilt, I'm going to go ahead and turn it before everything is dried. Okay, so almost done. I put the quilt top on top of the batting backing fused layer, if you will, and I've smoothed it out. There's no bubbles or wrinkles, and I'm going to do the exact same thing with my quilt top that I did with my batting. I'm just going to fold it in half. I'll fill in with glue. This time I have to be more careful about where I put my glue because I don't want it to end up all on the outside and have a bunch of sticky messes I have to avoid. So I'm going to try to pay attention to the border of my quilt and only glue within that. So if you wanted, you could trace around your quilt with some sort of marking pin, whatever you have around. It's not going to show in your final quilt, so it doesn't matter what you use, but you could trace all around the border of your quilt and only glue within that. Okay? So it's the exact same process. I'm just making sure that everything gets nice and smooth, and then after that, I'll let it air dry before I start quilting. You don't want to quilt while the glue is still dry because things can still shift and the glue can gum up your machine and be a big mess. If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want to support this channel, check out my merch shop and buy me a coffee page. Okay, let's get back to the video. When it's finally time to start basting your larger quilt, it's pretty similar to basting the mini quilt, except now you have to add in managing all that fabric. So everything is bigger, the quilt top is bigger, the batting is bigger, the backing is bigger. So you have to sort of learn how to manage that. So here's my quilt top. Here is my batting in this big bag. I've got a big roll of it. And I have my backing over on my ironing board to keep it all nice and flat because I just pressed it. Okay, I have arrived at part of the process that is pretty hard for me to film all by myself, but I'm going to try. So basically what I have here is my quilt top folded in half. This is the fold, and it's also the fold of the batting. So I've matched those up, and I've matched up my straight edge over here too. And then I have all that extra up there, which is perfectly fine. I can trim it off later. What I want to do right now is measure 6 inches from the edge of my quilt top right here because I want all of that extra batting surrounding my quilt. So if I'm cutting 6 inches here, that means I'm going to have 3 inches on each side of my quilt. Eventually, after I get it all basted together. But for now, I need to pull this side away a little more so I can have more access to my batting over here. I'm going to cut this off screen because it's like impossible to film myself doing it. But basically what I'm going to do is take one of my rulers and I'm going to cut along it at 6 inches. Or what you could also do is take your ruler and mark with like a marker or something, any of your marking utensils. You'll just mark the line and then you can cut right on the line. You could also theoretically put your cutting mat underneath the batting and use your rotary cutter to do it, but you're going to need to move the cutting mat as you go so you don't accidentally cut into your carpet or your floor or anything. Okay, I have moved to my kitchen table to do this because I needed a little bit more space, so you might hear more cat noises because they're having a field day because I moved things around. I also want to say that I'm going to be glue basting this quilt, and it looks a little bit different if you're glue basting compared to thread basting or pin basting. So I'm going to link to a video where I show you how to do that, where I show how to do thread basting and pin basting because you do the layers differently. So go ahead and check that out if you're interested. I'm going to link it in the description of this video. So when you're thread basting, or pin basting, you're going to be attaching all of the layers together all at once. Whereas with glue basting, I'm going to be focusing on just 2 layers at a time. So I'm going to start by gluing my top to my batting. Okay, so you can see on my batting that I have the exact center marked right here. I folded it in half, made a mark, and then I took my ruler and I measured 3 inches from the edge of the batting up, and then I just transferred that middle mark up. So these are going to be registration lines I use to get my quilt top aligned as perfectly as I can possibly do it. You can by all means eyeball this, but I like to be a little neater, just personal preference. So now I need to mark the center point on my quilt. So I'm just going to fold it in half. Then I'm going to take my washable marker. You could use any marking tool that you want. And I'm just going to make the tiniest little mark right here. And this mark is going to end up in my binding, so I'm not going to see it, but it will wash out too. To get started, I rolled up my quilt top in nice gentle rolls, or folds, whatever you want to call it, and I've lined up the middle of my quilt with the middle registration mark I made on the batting, and I lined up the edge of my quilt top with that line that I drew earlier. So that's all just to get it registered and centered and ready to go. When it comes time to start gluing, there are people who are going to be really casual about it, and they'll just kind of blah, 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 and just not overthink it. I've seen some people who just go like this and just literally squeeze like this, and wherever the glue lands, they don't worry about it. I, on the other hand, like to be a little bit more precise just because I don't want to end up with like any super big globs of glue that I'll have to sew through later. So I try to do it a little bit more evenly. But I do want to start by folding this up out of the way, like so. And then I'll glue along just above the registration line that I made. It's not really showing up on camera. And then I'll eyeball to the end, can't see that on camera either, and do the edges. And then I like to fill in with a nice zigzag, like this. If I skip parts, I'll go back and fill in what I missed. And I am not doing super huge lines of glue. That's just not necessary. So I'll just do that all the way down. I'm trying to remain consistent, but I know that I am not going to be 100% consistent. And then I'm going to just add another line of glue at the top. I'm sorry you can't see all of this as I'm doing it because I can't move the camera and do it at the same time. Anyway, fold it back down, and I'm going to make sure that everything aligns how it is supposed to. Now I have a couple options on how I want to proceed. I can go over to the other side of the table and start working this way down, or I can spin the whole thing around. I'm going to do the first one because it's a big hassle to spin the whole thing. Hopefully I can get a good angle on the camera so you can see what I'm doing. But while I'm over here, I'm just going to fold this back out of the way because I need to glue underneath that roll. Okay, sorry about the weird camera angle, but I want to show the edge here. So I have the edge of my quilt, and I'm going to just follow this line down with glue. I just wanted to see, I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to go across the width, all the way across. Okay, here's the other edge. I'm going to just follow down the edge like that. Okay? And then meet up with my line of glue in the middle. Sorry about my sloppy camera work. And then I'll go ahead and fill all of that in with glue. Over time, you're probably going to get a buildup of fuzz and glue on the end of your bottle, and you just want to remove that as you go so it doesn't clog up your nozzle. So it doesn't clog up your nozzle, and you can still get glue out easily. Okay, at this point, I have filled in with the glue. Not too much, not too little. It can be a little bit of a pain to figure out what the exact right amount is, but you will find it. So after that's done, I'm going to gently start unrolling the quilt top. And I'll scoot that up. And you can see that there are some bubbles. And so I'm just going to take time to tug the quilt top down a little bit where it needs to be tugged so it lays flat. And if I'm using my hands to smooth, I'm smoothing down, not up. I want to smooth down and work the bubbles out that way. And I'll often unroll it farther than I need to, so beyond the space that is glued, just so I can make sure that I get it as smooth as possible. And you can actually see over here, I missed, here's my glue. It came on the outside of where my quilt top actually landed, so I'll have to go back and fix that later on, just to get the edges down. Okay, now I will roll back the extra, back to my glue line, that's right about there. You can see just the little bits of glue, and I'll start the whole process over again where I glue the sides. Hopefully I'll do a better job this time. So I'll go down the sides, across the width, and then fill in, and I'll keep smoothing it out as I go. Now I still have this last little bit to glue down, but I want to make sure that I don't glue beyond what I need to glue. So I'm going to take my marker and I'm just going to do a little bit of a border line. So I'll just do some marks like this, just to use as a guideline, so I don't glue beyond that space. Okay, now that I am finished gluing the top down onto the batting and I've smoothed it out as much as I possibly can, I'm going to give it some time to air dry. But while it is drying, I'm going to go ahead and cut off some of this excess batting. And I always keep my extra batting because I like to make mini quilts, and these are usually the perfect size, or I can sew a couple pieces of batting together to make the perfect size. So I'm just going to take my ruler and my marker and I'm going to cut all but 3 inches off of there and set aside the extra batting for later. So before I attach the backing to the batting, I need to prepare it in the same way that I prepared the quilt top. So I have my ironing board under there. And I'm just going to get my fabric, fold it over, make sure it's even and there aren't any creases. So I want it to lay flat like that. And then I'll pull it again and roll it again. And I'll keep doing that for the entire length of this fabric. So all 108 inches. And then I can take it back to the batting and start gluing. Okay, I have given plenty of time for the glue to dry. You can see it doesn't come apart. It's nice and stable. What I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this completely over so that I can add the backing to this side. Now from here, I'm going to do exactly what I did to attach the quilt top to the batting. So I have my center mark for my batting and my center mark for my backing. I'm going to line those up as close as I can. And I'm going to line up the straight edge as much as I can. And then I'm just going to glue and unroll and smooth and do all of the exact same steps that I did for the quilt top. And you don't always have to do it in this order. You can do the backing and batting and then the quilt top, or the quilt top and then, it doesn't matter the order you do it in. But you do have to do it separately when you're gluing, and you do all the layers together when you're doing the other forms of basting. So I'm going to go ahead and attach this, and then I'll show you the finished product. Okay, here's my backing all smoothed down and glued down. There were a few spots where I had creases that I couldn't work out, but those should wash out eventually. And this is 108 wide backing, so I have a ton of extra fabric down here that I'm gonna cut off, and I can set it aside. There's probably plenty to do binding if I wanted to, but I'm gonna set it aside for a different project. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss upcoming videos. And I'll see you again real soon. Bye!